look at the directions. I'm going to reorder some of the directions a little bit. In the first 3 videos of this series, I went through how to basically do parts 1, well, pages, I should say, pages 1 through 5-ish. So it was step 1 that we were talking about. I took a look at step 2. It's talking about assets. We're not even going to go there yet. I think it's stupid to have it ordered after 1, honestly. So I'm going to skip 2, 3, and we're going to go all the way down to 4, because really, I mean, at this point, you could be setting up your file structure, but since a lot of you are unfamiliar with how to do that, honestly, I think it's easier to get the file structure started once you actually move into Visual Studio Code. We are just prepping to head into Visual Studio Code. I'm going to show you some things in CodePen first. So that's, I guess, the rationale for skipping those, if you will. So we're going to create a basic HTML structure for navbar, hero, image, and footer. Or at least I'll show you the basic concepts to do that. Okay, so this is where we left off in videos 1, 2, and 3. So if you want to know a little bit more about how I actually went about breaking down and diagramming this website, then go ahead and check those out in the series. This is where we left off. We were taking HTML tags and breaking them into boxes. I was showing you how one set or one pair of tags actually creates one box. And so this one particular div has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mini boxes inside and 8 separate tags of different types. And it was meant to resemble this beginning of the website. This is just a random website that I use that we are working for. Okay, so that being said, this is a really long website, obviously, and we're not going to code that much for our portfolio yet. We're still in the very, very beginning. So I broke it down to smaller steps here. Still the same exact layout, if you will, but I'm going to get my pen ready. That way you can see a little bit of what I'm doing while I do this. Let's do blue. It'll probably show up a little bit better. Okay, so we still have our HTML outside box. That is the basic purpose of that tag. I mean, this is a very basic explanation, but it's to talk to the browser and say, hey, look, I'm about to give you a whole bunch of the language called HTML. That way the browser or the machine can actually prepare to understand the language. It's kind of like going to speak to someone in French and warn them that you're about to speak to them in French. Like, okay, the next 5 sentences are going to be in French. So I need you to have some kind of preparation to understand that, almost like reading closed captioning, if you will. You're going to have to understand it in a different way. You can still get there, but okay, so that tag creates the outside box of which everything, your entire HTML page is going to live inside because it's all considered HTML markup language. It's all going to be written in there, so it makes sense then to make sure that it's all contained within the HTML tags. And then we have a body tag. I don't know all the ins and outs exactly on how this works, but in my head, I kind of see it as a little bit more of a conversation with the browser as well, saying, okay, look, I'm giving you some HTML language, and I'm also going to give you a whole bunch of things, a big bunch of information that's coming, and I might break that up into smaller parts, okay? There's also some other tags that we will meet here shortly, like you can put things in the head when you actually move into Visual Studio Code. So just because it's set up like this now doesn't mean that it has to stay set up like this, other than the HTML elements being out on the outside, because things can go in between here. All right, and then we have a header box using 2 header tags, and then we have a section box. Ooh, I did not end my section. I better do that because the machine, had I not done that, okay, so let's pretend I didn't do that and I actually fed this into the machine. You'll throw errors because consider you're the machine and you're like, okay, I know I got a box starting. I'm going to read the content inside of this box. It's going to keep expecting section content because it did not stop. It's not going to know to go then into the footer content. So it's important to let that machine know that, okay, I am moving into something different now. Basically a communication tool within the language itself is kind of how my brain sees it. Okay, so let's make sure we close that. That way the machine knows that we are closing that box down. Okay, and then we have a footer box as well. This is the setup for basically the bare minimum requirements of this particular assignment that we're working on. All right, so if you turn it in just redlined out like this, I would say, other than having an image and a button tag, because if you remember, the assignment asks for a bare minimum of these, at least in that first part. It gets more complicated later on. You need an image, button, section, div, H1, header, and footer. So we've covered a lot of those in just this really basic one that we're going to code out in CodePen. But before we go into CodePen, I want to show you a little bit more in depth about my characters. If these characters are not making sense to you, I do have another series on my YouTube called In the Beginning. You are probably going to want to look at numbers 1 through 10, even maybe before watching this series, because they do connect and they all use my laundromat metaphor. So HTML is all I've used right here. There's absolutely nothing on this page yet. So if I was actually to send this website out to a user right now, it would be a blank viewport because there's no content within any of these boxes. This is all just machine. It's all just a conversation with the machine right now, telling them to set things up for you. But the user is not going to see anything. And that's an important thing for you to remember as we progress through this web page. All right, so we have, in order to get the final product of our portfolio or web page, whatever one you happen to be working on, we're going to need a set of 2 different types of characters. We're going to need our HTML characters, and we're going to need our CSS characters. So up in this box, we met some of these in the other videos 1 through 3 here. We have Mr. Viewport, which is how the users actually see things. We have Betty Block, Ingrid Inline. We have our architect, and then we have our tags. And then we did not talk about this in the last video, but we also have the envelope. This is our messenger envelope. She is important in the communication between HTML and CSS, because if you notice, she also shows up again in our CSS characters. Okay, so these are our CSS characters down here. We still have the viewport. We have this guy named dot selector. He's pretty important also in the communication between HTML and CSS. We have our messenger envelope that's showing up again. Then we have Mr. Colon, and we have our brackets, and we have a semicolon. I am going to make separate videos on all these characters eventually. I mean, it's taking me a long time, but for now, just know that I kind of chunk these guys together. I don't have a technical name for them yet, but in my head, I see them as pauses, or a way to tell the machine that you are going to switch gears, or you might be shifting some information, you might be ending a line of information. It's kind of a way for the machine to say, okay, prepare for maybe a shift. There's going to be something new potentially happening. A lot of times it's an ending of something or an inputting of some kind of value. We have talked about her before. I've called them the members of the holder family. You could have parentheses, you could have brackets, you could have these squirrely, I don't even know what they're called. And quotation marks also are part of the members of the holder family. That's important because as we move into CodePen, we're going to use this setup. This is probably one of my favorite setups to understand. I've talked about this in class a couple times, what's happening on the page. And when I actually did Challenge 17, I did this first. I tried to see it all, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. I should have opened this earlier, but I did not. Okay. Before I coded any kind of website, okay, I went through all of this code that I did in Visual Studio Code. Obviously, this is like a somewhat done one. We're not even close to that yet. But all of this, when I started, when it really rendered or showed up in the viewport, all it looks like is this. It's a whole bunch of boxes, okay? Because I needed to visually understand if I had my layout. I have not done any sort of like major styling here yet. But the reason that I tell you that is because in order to do so, you're going to have to understand how to use at least one element of CSS, which is this particular one, which we'll talk about here soon, once we get into CodePen a little more. All right, so I am going to set this up in my window. That way we have a reference. and I'm going to put my code pen side by side, and we're going to just code out what I have written there. It's not obviously everything that you're supposed to do for the requirement. I'm sure there's a way to collapse these in Figma. I don't really know how to do it. I gotta figure that out. Okay, so I don't want you guys not to be able to see it, so we'll just make this bigger, and I'll reference back to it when we need to. Let's do it this way. Let's close this out. And we are going to close out this one because you already saw that, just because my computer gets hot if I have too much stuff going on. Okay. Video tutorial on basic website. Okay, so let's start. Our first tag or first box that we need to create is the HTML tag. Okay, that's going to be our very first one. So we are going to do an open tag, and I know that I also have to have a close tag. Okay, HTML. All right, we are not going to do too much with him other than I am going to separate him out, because I know that everything else is really going to have to go in between these two. All right, let's make this a little bit bigger so you can watch. We don't really need Mrs. CSS yet, and we definitely don't need Mr. Washing Machine, so we're going to put him aside complete, and we're going to make this one a little bit bigger, that way we can see. I think that's pretty nice in CodePen that you can do that. Okay, we don't have anything on the viewport yet. Remember, this white space down here is Mr. Viewport's world. This is what the user would actually see once things render to their screen. Okay, HTML is not going to show anything up. It's just conversation with the machine, so we should not expect anything to show up if that's all we have. All right, that's a good question you want to ask yourself as you're coding. Did what I expect to happen actually happen? And if it didn't, then you need to figure out why. And it's not always something you did. I just know that as a beginner. I made myself feel really bad thinking I was making all kinds of mistakes. All right, the next box nested within the HTML box is called the body tag. So let's go ahead and go to the next line, and I'm going to do a start tag because that will be the beginning of my box, and I'm going to do an end tag. Okay, I've created a box. In the beginning stages of coding, this is where I was like, okay, nothing happened. So how do I know if I even really made a box or not? And for me, I'm a visual person. I'm a tactile person. I could stare at this all day, and honestly, in the beginning, didn't know if it was set up right or not because nothing was happening, and that really threw me off. So I am going to use our CSS tools here. Okay, I wish I could get this cleaner side by side, but all right. Let's talk about this a little bit because this will help get something to show up on the viewport so we actually understand what is going on. Mrs. CSS, oh, I don't have her picture here. That's so sad. I'll have to get her picture on here for the next video. But just know that this is Mrs. CSS's team, okay? In order to style, because right now we have nothing. So Mr. Architect could set something up, a room, and it have absolutely nothing in it. He only built the walls right now. That's it. We just have walls. We have no furniture. We have nothing. So for now, I want to lay down the floor of the room, at least a floor, so that I can have an aerial or a top view looking down at the architect sketch, and I can actually see what Mr. Architect is laying out. That's the basis of what we're about to do. Okay, so Mr. Architect comes in and he sets up the first box, which is a body box. All right, and we know that because that's what we're trying to do over here. We're trying to come up with a body box, but I can't see it, and that's a problem. Okay, so what he has done is he has put the name of the tag, which is body, into this envelope. This is my messenger envelope. Okay, so we are going to write the word body, and I'm going to make it a pretty color. That way it shows up a little bit. Okay, he's putting in the body box, but that is all he's done. He did not put any styling or any other kind of information in there for Mrs. CSS because she already knows the bigger elements, the bigger tags. Those are more recognizable to her. So that's the only information that needs to be carried down to CSS. So how does that happen? Okay, right now we don't need, we don't see Mr. Link, but there is a Mr. Link happening here. In CodePen, it's kind of nice because they don't have you actually make any document connections. You're not connecting HTML to CSS. So I will show you how to actually do that in Visual Studio Code, because I have a feeling that's probably why a lot of you struggle at first, because a lot of things are happening with Mr. Link here that we don't physically see. But just know that there has to be a link so that this particular message or this envelope messenger is going to carry through Mr. Link. And isn't he so cute? He's like a little caterpillar. He's probably one of my favorite characters, honestly. He is a tag himself, so he almost creates a portal. So this particular envelope is going to travel. Actually, let's group them together so that you can see them all together. Okay, he's going to travel through Mr. Link and come down here to CSS. Okay, obviously still really up here because we didn't go through and change the HTML tag, but this envelope now has shown up in CSS. It's pretty stinking amazing. So that's the capability and the power of Classy the envelope. She can transfer through, or she can travel through portals. It's pretty amazing. She starts in the HTML document. She travels down through Mr. Link with this super awesome Converse shoes, and then she comes down into the CSS document. Okay, very, very simple, sketch example, obviously, of what's happening, but that's what we are going to do. Right now I can't see anything because no one has traveled and there's not been any kind of styling. So I'm going to write the word body here because that is the envelope. That is our representation in code of what that envelope just did in our Figma file. So whatever information is contained in the body tag on the left over here is going to carry through the power of Mr. Link, which you cannot see him right now because we're coding in CodePen. And that information then will come over here to this particular body tag. But it's not called a tag over here. It's called a selector when you're talking about that. All right, so what I just did now, out of habit, because I've done this so many times now, is I have put in 2 members of the Holder family. They're the next people in our story. All right, they're here. They contain information or put it into one spot, almost as one unit, so that the machine can read it. So they're holders of information. And what will go in here is what information Mrs. CSS will need in order to style the empty room that we have. Okay, so what she really holds is, I have to get my CSS girl because she's important to our video. Sorry, guys. I should have put her in before the video, but I feel like if you don't understand what she's doing here. Come on, Mrs. CSS. All right, she is in. Okay. All right, now we have covered the body. That is this particular aspect that we just discussed. And she travels with the help of Mr. Link between documents. They're almost kind of like pairs. All right, they're little buddies, partners in crime, if you will. Okay, he's going to carry this envelope to CSS. All right, then we have the members of the Holder family, which are here. So we'll put those down here. Okay, then we have these things called properties and values. Trying to get a color on here for you so you can see a little bit. Okay, so this is going to be a property. And then we have a Okay, and then we have our other guys over here. We have Mr. Cole. These guys look angry. I almost like feel like I made them angry when I first learned, because they're kind of like, hey, machine, I'm gonna go do something. I'm doing something different. Kind of like a pause or a shift in information or a stop. I'm sure there's some fancy discussion of it in the coding world, but this is how a beginner head understood it. Okay, so then we have this guy. All right, so we have used all of our characters except for dot selector. We'll talk about him later because he has another friend. Okay, but I just wanted you to know he's important in this family as well. Okay, so let's bring Mrs. CSS in because I want to talk about this a little bit. So we have a background color. That's a property. So really, anything on this left side of her purse is considered a property. And these are going to be things like color, background color, height, width. What else do we have? Animations, transformations. You can find all kinds of these on W3 Schools. These are all properties. So basically anything on this list, anything, can go on the left side of her purse with all the pictures. That is kind of like a prepackaged box. Almost like the HTML tags had prepackaged information. So do the properties. They have prepackaged information that are able to speak to these particular language documents, and they can do different things depending on what you are styling. And you've seen in class that some of the CSS documents can get really, really long. We can go more into that in depth with that in another video. But we also have these things called values. So that's more specific information. It's one thing to say, okay, we've got a property of background color. I want it to be red, but you might need to give it 4 pixels. You might need to give it a bit of solid information. It just depends on the property that you are using. And if you click on any of these, let's go with one we're maybe more familiar with. If we could click on height, anything here in blue then would be considered a value. So the red is the property, and then the blue, those are the values. Okay, so we have properties and then we have values, and that's why I set up Mrs. CSS purse back in the day when I did it. So this is property and this is value. Let's turn this red too, so maybe that helps you a little bit. See. Okay, and why do I explain that? Because in here we're going to need to see what's happening, because right now I do technically have 2 boxes. I have a green outside HTML box, and then within that box I've set up my green body box, but I can't see it. So I am going to, within my holder family, I'm going to type a property, which is background color. I'm going to put a colon for Mr. Colon, because that's telling the machine, okay, there's a shift of information. I need to do something different. And I am going to color these green just because that's the color. Okay, now the entire viewport went green. Ooh, that's like really bright. I don't know if my eyes can take that. Let's, in case you're curious, colors for HTML, maybe I just like this because I think it's super fun. Any of the colors that you want to use that are just by name, this is just one way to do it. Obviously, you can use hex code or RGB or anything. If you want different colors, I use this a lot just when I'm doing this process. Let's try medium sea green. That seems a little bit less bright on my eyeballs. Medium sea green. Okay, that's a little better. All right. I have a color because Mrs. CSS has come in and she has laid down a floor. But we really haven't created any furniture or any kind of content yet on the page. We're going to do that soon, but just know that we're just styling areas. We're only styling the boxes. We are not creating any sort of content yet. I mean, I guess you can consider the coloring content if you want. So yeah, let's call that content. The color is the content. It's just the floor. Okay. Um, let's take a look back at our diagram. We have the body, which we just turned green, and it's good that it colored the whole viewport. That's what we expected to happen because our box, our body box, is surrounding the entire header section and footer. So we wanted it to be green, okay? And I am gonna see if I can even get a little lighter color because I think it's gonna be, we're gonna go with linen because I think as we progress through this, you're gonna, okay, we are building a website, I promise. Okay, that's linen. I've taken it from white. Still can't see it all that great, but I don't want it to get in the way. All right, our next box that we need to build then is a header box. I know the header box is within the body and within the HTML. It's nested within both of them. So I'm gonna have to break this up. You can do that. The computer still knows that it has two boxes because it reads it, and I'll sketch this out for you guys too, a little bit better. And so if that helped you before, I'll do one of those as well. Okay, so I have HTML box on the outside, then I have a body box within, and then I need to create my header box. So I'm going to do a header tag, and I'm going to close that header tag. I'm not going to do anything else with it yet. I just told the machine, okay, I'm creating a third box now. Okay, I want to style this as well, so I need to communicate with Mrs. CSS. Okay, I'm not going to communicate this time with a body though because we just created a header tag. I need to communicate with the header tag, so I am going to do that, make that a header. That's what the envelope is carrying now. That's the information that started up in CSS. Okay, so we are going to talk to the header tag, so it starts as a tag, travels down through Mr. Link, arrives in the CSS document, and then becomes a communicating tool to the rest of the CSS information. So that's going to tell CSS, okay, I'm now talking to the header in the HTML document. And within that header tag, this is what I want you to do. So basically it's saying within the header box, these are the changes, these are the decorations, these are the stylings that I want to take place, okay? In our instance that we just did, we just made it a linen color for the head, but we're gonna make it blue this time. Okay, so let's move him over a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna move my guys out of the way because I think you get the point a little bit. Just know that they're connected to, oh my gosh, I hate it when my layers are a mess in Figma because then you get that result. If I had more time, I would have actually organized all that out for you, but okay. All right, so in CodePen, we are going to talk to the header, okay, because we have a header here and then we have a header here. So I'm going to be speaking within this box. This is the box that I want to talk to, okay, but there's nothing in there yet. All right, and then I'm going to put members of my holder family in, and then I'm going to pick my property, which is background color, and then I'm going to put blue, and I'm going to put another a semicolon, Mr. Semicolon there. Okay, so I have done everything. I have connected the header, I've colored the background color blue, and I was just trying to figure out why that blue wasn't showing up as a box, and it looks like it is because there's no content in there. I didn't want to add content in there yet, but I figured since you're actually trying to visualize there, let's make it actual content though. Let's write my name because we're making a portfolio. So let's pretend that this is where I want to put my name. Now my dogs are barking. Always, never a dull day around here. Okay, so we have our header box. It is colored blue. It was a block level element, so it started at the top left and it spanned from the left to the right. Okay. Let's go through and see. Now you notice that in my diagram, I actually have it sized the way that I would like it to be once my website is finished. It is not sized here because I have not told Mrs. CSS to do anything else other than color the background blue or put in the floor. That's all she can do because I haven't told the machine to do anything different. Okay. All right, so let's try our section tag next. Shush. Okay, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna close it and close my box up. I'm not going to do anything else and see what happens. Okay, I can't see anything because I haven't put in any content and I haven't done any sort of styling. So I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna speak to the section tag again. All right, and that, I'm not gonna do this for everyone, but I wanted to show you that you could do the same thing. You can then speak to, instead of this time starting up at CSS as the header, you are going to start with the section. And then this messenger envelope is going to travel through Mr. Link. It's going to come on down to CSS, and he is now going to speak to the section. And this time we are going to color it purple. No. Let's do pink. Okay. And we're going to go back, and then I'm going to go let my dog out. Okay, and let's go background color, which is the property. The value will then be pink, and we're going to tell the machine that we are done with the semicolon. Clean that up a little bit, see what happens. We may not get it to show anything either with this one. Okay, so we're going to have to add some kind of content. So this is where my content will be. Okay, now it's going to show up, and I'm going to go let my dog out real quick. Okay. So now we have pink section, so we have created yet another box. You know what? I have another way to do this. I wonder what would happen. Now let's finish this box and then we'll go back and try that theory too. All right, so we need to create our footer box now. So let's go back in. I'm gonna go, and I still want it to be within the body. So I'm going inside the body, and it's still within HTML. Oh, I forgot to put that in because I had that moment where I was trying to figure out what was going on. Let me add that back in because we don't want to forget that it's all surrounded by. And I like to indent a little bit, even in CodePen, so I can see what's happening. Okay, and then we need to do a footer. Okay, so I have, let's move this down. I have one HTML box, I have a second body box, I have a third that is a header box, I have a fourth that is a section, and then I have a fifth that is a footer. Okay, let's make sure that's how many total we are supposed to have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. Cool. We definitely cannot see them all yet, but that's okay. this is my footer. We'll add a little content in there so you can see it. Okay, again, we are going to communicate with the footer tag this time. And we want to color the background color green. Let's do sea green. I think that was a color. Maybe I made that color up. Nope, that's a color. Okay, so we have 3 boxes only that we can visualize. So what I'm going to try doing, since it did not work with the body, I am going to go back up to the body and I am going to put a border on it instead. So this time the property I am choosing over here will not be background color. It's going to be border instead. But I'm going to have 3 values. I need to tell it how many pixels I want it to be, which is going to be 5 pixels. I'm going to tell it I want it to be a tan color. Oops, but we want it to be within the blue. All right, next time I make a video, I'm going to, okay, we'll change the colors in a minute. Get all my layers organized. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna just delete it and start again. Okay, until I can get my layers organized. So that's my advice. Organize your layers or you'll be having a hot mess. Okay, so we're gonna have border. We're gonna do, the value will be 5 pixel border. It's going to also be solid, and it's also going to be tan in color, and then we will end it. Okay. So the property is border, the values. This time we're not speaking to the header though. We are going to go back and try to speak to the body. So the messenger would not share the information of section. It would share body. And it originates up in the HTML document. Okay, so let's try it. For border, 5 pixels, solid, and what I say, tan. Tan might be too hard to see, but okay. Hopefully you could see that a little bit. So the body is existing. We just could not see it before. With the background color, it looked like adding the border did the trick to see the box. So there's our 4th box. Okay, let's try that with the HTML as well and see if that will work, just so you can get a visual. I don't know if this will work or not in CodePen, even though it is technically still a box. Okay, so let's try adding a border. This time I'm speaking to the HTML tag. Okay, Mrs. CSS is having a conversation with Mr. Architect using the link character that we just talked about. Let's try 5 pixels. Try a solid border, and let's try well, it looks like it's already black, so we can just leave it that way. I mean, I could type black, but it did an auto border to black. So, and it looks like there's a little bit of built-in spacing in your HTML, so that's kind of nice to see when you do it that way. So you have your HTML tag all the way on the outside, and then you have your body tag. Your body tag is going to hold your entire website. Then you have a header. And then you have content, and then you have a footer, okay? Obviously, it's not really close to looking like an actual website yet. I'm going to stop this video since it's getting a little bit long, and then we will go into doing a little bit more of the assignment in the next video.